Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, talking about the author Charles Dickens, Charles Dickens was born to a Navy clerk. Charles Dickens spent his early childhood in Kent and setting for Pip's village in Great Expectations. And when Dickens was 10, the family moved to London, and his father was thrown in debtor's prison. And then he had a very bad time. He had to leave school and work in a boost blacking warehouse to help support the household activities. And then he later returned to school but left after 15 to work as a clerk. And then you find uh, uh, as a law clerk, he worked and a court reporter and a political journalist before devoting himself to, writing full time. And his books were widely, successful both in England and in the United States. So, and includes, classic like Great Expectations, Bleak House, and Oliver Twist. So Dickens also, founded a theater company and a magazine, and all the year round. That is the name of the magazine. And he was not happily, unhappily married to Catherine, with whom he had 10 children. And Dickens was still writing when he died in 1870. Are you all able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm having this background noise. I'm sure you must be having a must be listening the background noise also. But I can't help. There's no. Okay. So if we talk about the great expectations, the technological innovations that gave rise to the industrial revolution of the late 18th and the early 19th century that introduced the first capitalist economy, opening the social and the financial opportunities to people who had never had the chance to gain status or wealth under the rigid hereditary class hierarchy of the past. And these opportunities enabled people born into lower class to raise their standing in society by making money and acquiring education. So you see the new opportunities is turned inspired ambitions that had not been possible in the pre-industrial revolution, that is in England, and where one's path was determined strictly by birth. So Great Expectations explores both the dream and the realizations of such ambitions, uh, both what is gained and what is lost, and the showcases which lives from the uh, all the classes of the 19th century British society. Okay. So basically, if you see uh, Great Expectations, the full that is what it is. It said that it is it's a it's a coming of the age novel, sort of a genre, and this period was a Victorian period during which this was written. So based on the Victorian period, and this was published in 1861, and basically it was written between 1860 and 1861. And this setting of this novel was in Kent and London, England. And you find there were antagonists like Orlick, Bentley, drum, Drummel and competition, and you find so you know the the great expectations were based on serial fictions and alternative endings, where you find the in the Victorian era the books were often published by the magazines in serial installments before they were printed as complete books. So Great Expectation was serialized in all the year round, the weekly magazine Dickens founded and run. And it was published in the Great Expectation has been published in two different endings. Dickens rewrote the original ending in response to the complaints that it was too sad. So most contemporary edition of the novel was published with the revised and a very happier ending. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll put the characters. I'll put the characters because we have a lot of characters in this. Do you want me to discuss the characters?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Just a minute. I'll just share these. This the PPT. Just a minute. Okay. By the time I'm just telling you because it's not showing up. Okay. First character, if you say, is Pip Pirip. Okay, PIP, then PIRRIP, Pip Pirip. Okay, so who's Pip Pirip? Pip Pirip, if you see, Pip Pirip is the novel's hero, and Pip is an orphan who lives in his harsh and selfish sister, Mrs. Joe, and serves as the as a an apprentice of her gentle blacksmith husband Joe. So Pip is sensitive and intellectually curious, but he is, you know, um, um, he is also extremely ambitious. And when he unexpectedly comes into money as a teenager, Pip grows, haughty and extravagant in pursuit of lifestyle and gentle, enough to meet and refined standards of Estella. So the woman, he loves, and confusing personal integrity with public reputation, you find people cruelly, disloyal to Joe and Biddy, and avoiding them, because of their lower class. So still by the end of the novel, you see Pip learns to judge people by internal rather than superficial standards, and redeems himself by repenting sincerely and reforming his personal values. Okay, are you all able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So then we have the next character, that is Provis. Provis. Provis is, the escaped one. Yeah, so the escaped convict Pip, helps in the novel's opening scenes, and Provis's gratitude towards Pip inspires him to devote his, life savings to Pip, and becoming, Pip's anonymous patron, born an orphan on the streets and cruelly, swindled by the companion. Provis has lived a life in and out of prison. So still his criminal record is very largely and the result of unfortunate circumstances, not character. For Provis is kind, very kind and good-hearted, and it is immensely generous. Then we have the next character, that is Estella. Estella Havisham. Estella Havisham is the adopted daughter of Miss Havisham. Estella is very proud, refined, beautiful and cold, raised by Miss Havisham to wreak revenge on the male sex. So though her beauty and elegance attract countless suitors, which also includes Pip, Miss Havisham has raised her to lack, a true human heart, as she is unable to love. Then we have another, character, that is Joe Gargary. So Joe Gargary. So all these I'm telling are, major characters. Okay. So Joe Gargary, you see, as Mrs. Joe's husband, Joe is a father figure for Pip throughout Pip's childhood, and his, tender, kindness, which protects Pip from Mrs. Joe's harsh parenting. And Joe is, the village blacksmith and has no formal education, but possesses a deep sense of integrity and unfailing, moral compassion. So Joe is, loyal, generous and kind, and acts lovingly towards Pip, even when Pip is ungrateful. So you see that. Uh, then we have the next character is Biddy. So Biddy is an orphan Pip, an orphan. Pip meets at the school village, and Biddy moves into the forge to help out after Mrs. Joe's attack, and later, becomes a school teacher. And she's, humble, kind, moral, and fiercely intelligent, absorbing knowledge without any formal education. And she is also, sharply perspective, and sees through everyone's, pretensions, calling Pip out, on his delusions and snobbery, long before Pip can, recognize him. Them. And then we have, yeah, then we have some of the, uh, yeah. Then we have the next character is Miss Havisham. So Miss Havisham is the wealthy, daughter of Brewer. Miss Havisham was, abandoned on her wedding day by her fiance, Compieson, and traumatized. And she, preserves herself and her house in wedding regalia, shutting out the world for over 20 years. So, to exact her revenge on men, Miss Havisham adopts and raises Estella to be, beautiful and desirable, but completely heartless. So Miss Havisham is, capricious and manipulative. If you say is bitter, and you see till the end of the novel, is unable to recognize anyone's pain but her own. You know, and then we have the next character that is uh, Wimick, Wemick, Wemick. Wimick is, as Mr. Jagger's clerk. Wimick, models his characters on Mr. Jagger's while, in the office, where he is rational, very unemotional and money-minded. And but yet you find when Vimick is at home, his personality changes dramatically, and he is, warm, empathetic, and domestic and nurturing towards his elderly father, the aged. And Pip and Vimick are, good friends outside of the office, but maintains a very strict professional relationship in front of Mr. Jaggers. Then we have Mrs. Joe Gargary. Mrs. Joe Gargary. Mrs. Joe Gargary is Pip's old sister and guardian after his marriage. After you know, becomes the guardian, and Mrs. Joe is, fiercely. You can see. Um, you find she harps on her own, victimhood, being of very false, and even as she abuses Pip and Joe, and she is obsessed with, social status and reputation. But you see, after the attack of by, Orlick, that gives her, brain damage, Mrs. Joe, the personality changes completely, and she becomes patient, compassionate, and docile. Okay, clear. And then we have, Compieson. Compieson is a very cruel, scheming villain. Compieson is a forger and, counterfeiter who uses his educated upper class appearance to trick people into, thinking he is more, honorable and less guilty than the lower class criminals whom he manipulates. And, though Compieson may possess the trapping of gentility, he is ignorable uh, to some of the people, those who are in the court. So these are all the major characters. Then we have some of the minor characters. So the minor characters are, uh, Herbert Pocket, So Herbert Pocket is Pip's best friend, and Herbert is compassionate, honest, and unpretentious. And he and Pip, live together in London, where he works, in a counting house, then as a merchant. And he cheerfully, helps Pip, uh, though all of Pip's, struggle, and Pip secretly, invests in Herbert's career to help Herbert succeed as a merchant. And then we have Mr. Jaggers. Mr. Jaggers is a famous lawyer in London, and Mr. Jaggers is Pip's guardian and the middleman between him and his patron. And Mr. Jaggers also, works for Miss Havisham. So he is, rational, sharp-minded, and intimidating. And he prides himself on neither expressing nor responding to human emotions. Then we have Mr. Pumblechook. Pumblechook is a corn and a seed merchant and Joe's uncle. And Mr. Pumblechook is superficial, calculating, and very false type of a person. So he takes undue credit for parenting Pip. And then we have Orlick. Orlick is originally Joe's journeyman, and Orlick is devious and violently vengeful, and he resents Pip, whom he blames for all of his problems. And then the next character is Bentley Drummel. Bentley Drummel studies with Pip, and he is a wealthy, hire to baronecy, and upper class, according to the old system of inherited rank, and described as an idle, proud, and suspicious. So Dumble is Pip's nemesis, and he pursues Estella. Okay. Just a minute. Okay. And then you see next is Startup. So Startup studies with Pip, and though spoiled by an overprotective mother, Startup is a good-natured and a helpful friend. Then we have Matthew Pocket. Matthew Pocket is Miss Havisham's cousin and Herbert's father and Pip's tutor. Matthew Pocket is honorable, upstanding, and very kind. Then we have Mrs. Pocket. Mrs. Pocket is helpless, title obsessed wife and a very distressed mother. Then we have Mr. Whipple's great aunt. Mr. Whipple's great aunt is the incompetent teacher as at the village evening school. And Mr. Whoopsel is the another character, that is the village church clerk who moves to London to be an actor. Then we have the next character is Mr. Trabb. Mr. Trabb is the Toady village tailor, and Trabb's boy is Mr. Trabb's mischievous assistant. And then we have Millers, Plopson, and Sophia, Mr. and Mrs. Pocket's, hired maids who, runs the Pocket's household to their own advantage. Then we have Jane Pocket. Jane Pocket is Mr. and Mrs. Pocket's daughter. And then we have Molly. Molly is Mr. Jagger's maid, whom, Wimmick describes as a wild beast tamed. Arthur Havisham is Miss Havisham's resentful half brother and Compeason's partner. Then we have Sarah Pocket, Camilla, Georgina, and Raymond. They are all, Miss Havisham's selfish relatives. The aged, as I said, we mix Jolly, nearly on a dead father, and then Miss Skiffins. Skiffins is the handsome, good-natured women, beautiful, good-natured women. Wimmick, courts and eventually marries. And then we have the Avenger. Avenger is Pip's servant. And then Clara. Clara is Herbert's, fiance. Then we have Bill Barley. Bill Barley is Clara's ogre, like father. And then we have Pip 2 also. Pip 2, who is Pip 2? Is Joe and Biddy's son. So Mr. and Mrs. Hubble is, the village wheelwright, and Mrs. Hubble is the wife, and Mrs. Coiler. Coiler is Mr. and Mrs. Pocket's neighbor, and Mrs. Wimpley. Wimpley is Clara's landlady. So these are all the characters that we have in, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Am I clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Pushpita, you had something to ask. Your hand was raised. Pushpita Behra.
No, sir, actually mistakenly.
Okay. Okay. So did you understand the characters?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We understand the character.
Okay. Okay, so we will go to the next. We will. I will tell you the. Yeah. So I'll tell you the. You know the plot, or how it was designed. Just give me 1 minute. 1 minute. Yes, so talking about the plot, the Pip is an orphan, living in. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So it's an orphan, living in the south east of England with his, foul-tempered sister, and here Mrs. Joe and her gentle husband Joe Gargery, the village blacksmith we find, and on Christmas Eve, Pip encounters an escaped, convict in a leg iron who scares, Pip into, stealing food and a metal file for him. And Pip, steals the food and file from his sister's pantry. Okay, and then you find then uh, and Joe not only steals from his sister's pantry, but and also Joe blacksmith's shop. And then the next day, Pip and Joe see, soldiers mm, capture the convict on the marshes where he restlessly, bitterly, with another escaped convict, and the convict Pip, helped protect, Pip by confessing to the theft of the food and file. And Pip's involvement in the theft goes undiscovered. So then you find soon after this, Pip is, invited to start visiting her wealthy Miss Havisham and her, snobby daughter, Estella, at the Satis house. So Miss Havisham is, was abandoned by her fiancé 20 years prior, and seeks revenge on men by raising Estella to mercilessly, mm, break hearts. And Estella's, disdain for Pip's, commonness inspires Pip's dissatisfaction with life as an, apprentice blacksmith, and he grows infatuated with Estella and assesses himself by her standards long after his Satis house visit come to an end. And then we find, Pip Pip is, Pip is apprenticed mm, to Joe and, grows increasingly despot, despondent at his low status, seeking, to evaluate himself through independent study. And when Mrs. Joe is brain, damaged by the blow of an intruder at the forge, Pip, suspects Olik, Joe's cruel, journeyman helper, and Biddy moves in to run the household and becomes Pip confident, but trying to win to help Pip and get over Estella. So one night you find that Mr. Jaggers, tells Pip that he has an anonymous patron who wishes Pip to be trained as a gentleman, and Pip, assumes that this patron is Miss Havisham. Okay, and that Estella is secretly, mm, breathe out. You find Estella is secretly betrothed to him and sympathetic to Joe and Biddy's sadness at losing him. Pip snobbishly mm, badnesses his new status and goes to study with Matthew Pocket. So Pip, you know, lives part time with Matthew's sweet-tempered son and son that is Herbert Pocket in London, and where the two become fast friends. And Pip's study mates are Startup and Bentley, and the foul tempered hired to be um, Barrett Tetsi, who becomes Pip's nemesis when he pursues Estella and now an elegant lady. But Pip also befriends Wimmick, Mr. Jagger's clerk, who is a proper in the office and warm and friendly outside of it. But Pip spends extravagantly and puts on air, alienating Joe and Joe's trip to London. And Pip wishes Joe were more refined and fears association with him with Geo Paradise, his own social status. So he doesn't return to the forge until he hears Mrs. Joe has died. So even then, his visit is a very brief kind of a visit. Are you getting me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So then you see back in London, mm, Pip enlists Wimmick's help to invest secretly in Herbert's career, and you find a gesture Pip considers the best result of his wealth or expectations. So on one night, you see Pip's patron finally, reveals himself, and he is, Provis, the convict. Pip is helped on the marshes, who has saved up a fortune while in exile and sailed back to England illegally just to see Pip. And then we see Pip is, appalled by Provis's manner and devastated to realize Estella's can't possibly be, betrothed to him. And when he confronts Miss Havisham, she admits she, led Pip on regarding Estella simply to make her selfish relatives jealous, and that Estella will be married to Bentley Drumble. So when heartbroken, Pip confesses his love for her, and Miss Havisham realizes her error in depriving Estella of her heart. So she pleads for Pip's forgiveness, which Pip, readily grants. And back in London, a few days, later, Pip realizes that Estella is daughter of Provis and Mr. Jagger's maid Molly. And then you find, Provis's arrival on the marshes was, Compeyson and Miss Havisham's, devious former fiance, and Compeyson is looking, for Provis in London, and Pip's plan to, get Provis out of England by boat. So Before they escape, Orlik, manages to lure, Pip to the village marshes and tries to, kill him. But Herbert, intervenes. So if you see, Pip nearly succeeds in escaping with Provis, but compassion stops them, and then drowns. Wrestling with Provis in the water, and Provis is arrested and found guilty of escaping illegally from the penal colony of the New South Wales, but dies from illness before his execution. Okay, but then you see. Pip falls ill, and Joe nurses him and pays his debts. And healthy again, Pip returns to the village hoping to marry Biddy, only to stumble upon her happy wedding with Joe. But Pip, you know, goes abroad with Herbert to be a merchant, and when he returns 11 years later, he finds a spitting image of himself with Joe and Biddy's son Pip too. Okay, and runs into Estella on the raised, site of Satis house. The suffering has, made Estella grow a heart, and she and Pip, walk off together, never to, part again. So that's all about, the great expectations and the plot. Okay, so we see. Do you want me to discuss the themes?
Yes, sir.
How many of you have read Great Expectations before the class? Nobody has read? Okay. Okay. So, coming to the themes which were discussed, which has been
Sir,
reflected by, yes,
sir,
yes,
I was aware of this topic.
sorry.
If, sir, I was not aware about the topic we are discussing today.
Oh, Abhiksha, we are going.
So kindly, if you will tell about the.
Abhiksha, we are going as per one after the other. Today we have done block 4. Next class we'll do block 5 only.
Uh, in one day we are completing one.
Yeah, we are completing one block only.
Okay, sir. We will tomorrow we will continue middle March.
The next one, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. We will be aware about this next classes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Didn't you attend my first classes?
Sir, I tried to attend that classes, but due to some technical reason or something, last class also I could not able to attend.
Oh, okay, okay. That is why probably because we had discussed this in the previous classes.
Oh, yes, sir. I will be more attentive from tomorrow.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So, talking about the themes, first we see social class. As I said in the very beginning, that it was Great Expectation was set nearly during the end of the Industrial Revolution, a period where dramatic technological improvement in manufacturing of commerce that among other things which created new opportunities for people who were born in the lower and the poorer class to gain wealth and you know move into a higher and a wealthier class. So you find this you know mm, new social mobility marked a very, distinct break from the hierarchy. Mm. And hierarchy aristocracy of the past, and which enforced class consistency based on the solely on family lines. So great expectations is set in this new world, and Dickens explores it by tracing Pip's ascent through the class system, trajectory that would not have been possible within the rigid class hierarchy of the past. And then we also see that ambition and self improvement, where Pip is a small seed, kind of something that starts off tiny and then grows into a very developed and into sometimes new. But Pip's name then is no accident, as a great expedition, and a a story of the growth and the development of its own main character. And Dickens is presents the ambition to improve oneself that drives Pip, along with many of the novel's secondary characters, as a force capable of generating both positive and negative results. So Pip's early ambitions focus on elevating his social class, on making himself into someone who seem worthy of Estella. But in the process, you see, he returns himself into someone who feels like a sham, is unkind of those who are kindest to him, such as Joe and Provis, and ruins himself financially. So through these, you can see that these experiences, Pip, eventually comes to understand self-improvement as more complex process involved more and spiritual development as well. So Pip's own ambitions are echoed by the self-improvement, efforts of secondary characters like Joe and Miss Havisham, who learns, to write and to empathize respectively. So at Pip's, encouragement. I'm sorry. And then we also see reputation, integrity. All these are also reflected by Dickens, because Dickens explores the pride as both a positive and a negative trait by presenting various types of pride, ranging from Estella to Estella and Drummel, snobbery to Joe, and Biddy's moral uprightness, and the crucial distinction between these different varieties of pride is whether they rely on other people's opinion, or whether they spring from a character's internal consciousness and personal sense of accomplishment. So characters who espouse the former variety are concerned with reputation, not with integrity. And among these, you find Mrs. Joe, Uncle, uh, Plumblecook, Estella, Drummle. All these, you find all these are there, and because these characters measure themselves according to public opinion, they are constantly, comparing themselves to people around them, and you know, de uh, denigrating, others in order to make themselves seem superior by comparison. Then we see, parents as one of the themes, because you see, as the novel distrusts, British culture's traditional, uh, you know, blind faith, and you can say in the family lines, and it also looks skeptically at the traditional family unit. So great expectations include very few models of healthy parent child relations. So many of the novels character, including Pape, Provis, Biddy, all are orphans, and those that aren't orphans come from a broken or a dysfunctional families, like see Herbert, Miss Havisham, Estella, Clara, all these people. So though Wimmick relation with the aged parents seem like an expectation, it's important to note that Dickens introduces us to them at a stage on their lives when the dynamic has has inverted, and Wimmick parents his father rather than being cared for by him. So not until the last things you see we that we can encounter the functional traditional family, which are newly started by Joe and Biddy. And then we see Justice is also another character where Pip's encounters and escapes convicts as the beginning of the Great Expectations. And you find because here the British legal system is involved, is casted in the novel, and so the family is involved, though Mr. Jaggers function as the upstanding force in Pip's life by checking Pip's extravagance. And then we have generosity. Generosity is Dickens explores many different understandings of generosity of the Great Expectations, and through Pip initial generosity towards the Provis is mostly motivated by fear. Provis understands it as a true generosity and response by selflessly devoting his life saving towards Pip's future. So meanwhile, you find Mrs. Joe and Uncle Plumley Cook understand generosity as a status marker, and they are much more interested in being considered generous than in actually acting generously. So they thus find constantly they take credit of Joe's generosity to better their own reputation in time. So these are some of the themes that are reflected by you know um, Dickens in his text. This is all about Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. Um, Tomorrow, the same time, we will do another text. That is the next text, the Middlemarch. Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
There are 39 students in the class, and I can only hear two people speaking. The rest, are you listening or just attending the class?
We are listening, sir.
Listening, sir.
Listening, sir.
Okay, okay. So try to, whatever we are discussing, please try to, work out on it so that, you will be able to, mm, you know, at least remember that till your exams. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because your
yes, sir.
exams will be in the month of June. Yeah. Yes, somebody wanted to ask something.
Sir, I had one question regarding the plot line that you have explained. Since you have told about the Great Expectations plot line, what is the plot line of Great Expectations written by Charles Dickens? There are some other novels written by Charles Dickens like Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby. More or
Yeah,
less, the plot is same, like the problems that orphan students or orphan
yeah,
small boys has to face. So more or less,
correct.
can we write out the answers when we are writing?
Yes, yes,
We
of
can
course you can. Of course you can write, because that is what Um, that is what you can when you are writing your answers, you can include them in the very first explanation of your paragraphs. Do that is what I say when you are writing your answers. Do not write too much about the author. Just introduce the author and then write how this genre has been written, based on what. Okay, you can get into the text through by introducing the genre.
Okay, sir. I have got some previous questions from next class. If we get some time, we'll ask the questions regarding the novel that you're teaching. Thank you so much, sir. It was a
Oh,
nice class.
yeah, yeah. Any more questions? What is your name? Salman Karim, right?
Yes, sir. My name is Salman.
Yeah, yeah. Are you there in the group?
No, I have not got the link. If you
Okay.
can share the link, then
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can.
Yes, yes, yes. Can somebody send the link in this?
And for the information, sir, this class I have recorded it as well so that I can listen it again
Yeah,
because your class was good.
okay. Salman, actually, this class is also being recorded by.
That's good. That's good, sir. That's good.
Yeah,
Some of the classes we are getting very less, sir. So the provision, if created, because many of the people couldn't join during the time of the class, they
right,
want. So
right.
if you can understand that online classes are slightly getting less during this time, so we want to preserve these golden opportunities that we are getting from the teachers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think one of our students from here, uh, he is recording. Mr. Pramod, I think. What is his name? I forgot. Um, yes, Pramod sir is recording. Pramod sir, are you there today? I think Pramod sir is there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good evening, sir. Good evening. Namaskar, namaskar. Pramod sir is there, and Pramod sir is recording the classes. So for everyone's benefit, I think in the group also you must have got the recordings. He is editing whichever portions required, and he's doing the things. So I really appreciate Pramod sir's taking all the pain and doing it.
Sir, can we get the link here, please?
Yes, can somebody send the link? Just a minute, wait. I'll
Sir, only admin can send the link.
Yes, yes, that is what I'm just checking whether I am the admin or not. No, I am not the admin. Purna Chandra Patra. Purna, are you there? Can you listen to me? He's there in the class, but Purna, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Purna, can you hear me? Hello? Some people are very unattentive in the class. At least for 1 hour, everyone should be. What I'm doing is I'm giving you my number. You can text me. I'll add you later. Okay.
Sir, I am not in group.
Okay,
Can
sir.
you join
Thank
me,
you so
please?
much.
Yeah, yeah, I'm giving you my number. Have anyone has anyone gone through the text middle much?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. So talking about by Middlemarch by George Eliot. Okay. So to talk about George Eliot, George Eliot was the daughter of an estate manager, and she, received an unusually extensive education for a girl at at the time, and up to the age of 16. And, after this point, she continued to read widely, and the result of which are palpable in her writing, which is, intellectually sophisticated and filled with references to a diverse array of knowledge. So, as a young woman, she became socially involved with a group of agnostics and political radicals, and she began translating works of German theology into English and publishing short reviews in periodicals. And she spent time living alone in Geneva before moving to London, where she worked as an editor of a progressive literary journal named the Westminster Review. And Eliot, met George Henry Lewis in 1851, and Lewis was in an open marriage, and he and Eliot soon, become a couple traveling to Germany together, and living there as husband and wife. So, if you look at Middlemarch, this was set between 1829-32, 40 years before it was written and published, and yeah, as a result, it is considered to be a historical novel. So you might get a question saying that justify Middlemarch as an historical novel. Am I clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So although some critics, argue on the difference between it is set and when it was published, and it is, we're not very significant enough to warrant this particular, phrase. So Middlemarch is very, attentive to the historical events of the time, which play a significant role in both the, foreground and background of the narrative. So most of these parts, if you see, these are in the 1832 Reform Act, which expanded the population of eligible voters in the country and changed the aspect of the parliamentary system in order to, make it more democratic. So there are different events. You can see some important events like the Catholic Relief Act of 1829, which, allowed the Catholics to become members of the parliament, and the rapid development in science and medicine that took place in the early 19th century, and the lead up to the railway boom of the 1840s. So all these you've seen. So you see, this was written, as I said, it was written in between in London, in England, and it is a 19th century English novel. And as I said, the genre you can talk about it is a historical novel, and it is set in a fictional town in Midlands, England, in the year 1829 to 32. So you see, coming to the discussion. So what do you want me to discuss today? Do you want me to discuss the characters, the plot,
So character and thematic analysis.
Okay. Okay. Today Salman is there.
Yes, sir. I'm there. I'm there.
Okay. Okay. Salman, you had some questions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I had some questions, but once it's done, I will be asking the questions so that everybody could enjoy the questions as well. So that's why I'm quiet.
Okay. Okay. No, no, because we can take the questions, because it's more important that we should take the questions than, doing the class. Means this is basically a counseling class, so we should take more on the questions and discuss. So if you have
Okay, sir.
any questions, yeah.
Okay, sir. Going on with the previous year questions, that first question that there is that how does George Eliot depict society in transition in Middle March? That has come in December 2018.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So, society, how is it like in transition? That what should we mention in this, sir?
When it is talking about society, we will. Okay. Do you know the plot?
So, little bit I have gone through. I
Okay.
because the
Okay. So,
novel is
yeah.
very big. That's why I
Okay.
couldn't
Okay.
go through entirely. But little bit I know.
Okay. Okay. So what we'll do? Let me do the plot, and then we'll come to this particular question. Okay. The question that you asked, the society one, we'll discuss this. Anything else? Any question? Any more questions that you have? Others?
Sir, I think we should discuss the plot so that we can
Oh
understand
yeah,
the.
I'll do it. Okay. 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 We'll do that. So let me come to the characters first. All these characters that we have, these are, we have some of the minor and the major characters. So the first character, if we say Dorothea Brooke, Dorothea Brooke is, you see, although in some ways Middlemarch, does not center around a very single character, but this character is the very closest novel which gets to a protagonist, and very uniquely strong-willed, passionate, and a very rebellious person, and is a very deeply religious woman. So she is also committed to social reforms and channels her energies into designing cottages for the tenant farmers on her uncle Mr. Brooks' estate. And later you see planning a colony for workers. Ultimately, these plans do not transpire into part due to Dorothea's naivety, and in part due to the significant restrictions placed on women in society in which she lives. So somewhere you will see, you will also see the femininity has been given importance in this text. So Dorothea is painfully aware of ways that she doesn't confirm the ideal of femininity, and she tries to reconcile her big ambitions with her desire to better meet this ideal through her marriage at 18 to 45 years old. uh, uh, and who is the person? That is 45 years old Reverend Edward. So Dorothea's bitter appointment in the marriage and in the um, uh, and the confusion that she was going through when she was 21. You know the property all were left for her, and nobody was with her to look after her. And Dorothea and Will are far more suited to each other due to their shared earnest, passionate, and convention flouting personalities. But you see, it makes them a while to admit that they are in love with one another, partly due to dilemma which is caused by um, uh, Casaubon's will. And although Dorothea eventually ends up happily married to Will and the mother of his children, the narrator says that it is a shame that all her ambitions, Dorothea was not able to lead a very you know um, um, very ambitious or great life, and leave a more very impactful legacy. So then we have the next character, that is Celia Brooke. So Celia Brooke is Mr. Brooke's niece and Dorothea's sister. And she is kind and cheerful, though very less intelligent and than her sister, whom she struggles to understand. And Celia finds it easy to conform to the ideals of womanhood upheld in Middlemarch. So, and indeed enjoys living her life in this way, and she marries Sir James Chatham after Dorothea's Dorothea rejects him, and has a baby named Arthur. And then we have Mr. Arthur Brooke, and Mr. Arthur Brooke is Mr. Brooke is Celia and Dorothea's uncle, who is charged with their education and care after their parents die young. And he is lifelong bachelor who traveled a lot on his youth, and he's generally a friendly type of a person, but you see, people fool him a lot. He behaves in such a way. So he changes his mind very often, and sometimes also gets into different complicated discussions, and he's also um, decidedly sexist. So more Brooke, Mr. Brooke, you see, decides to run for the election as a Whig in the Middlemarch and recruits Will Ladislaw to help with her political campaign, as well as to take over editing the local progressive newspaper, that is the Pioneer, which Mr. Brooke has purchased. And his move into politics gets off to a rocky start, as people accuse him of hypocrisy, of pushing a social reform agenda, which he is known to be a terrible landlord. So you see that he you see that it is seen that Mr. Brooke lives to a very old age. And then we have the next character, that is Sir James Chitham. It is Chetam. Okay, so you can pronounce in two ways. Is it Chetam or Chitham? So Sir James Chitham is a wealthy and a charming young man who, whose land borders Mr. Brooks, and he initially pursues Dorothea and seems to be very deeply in love with her. However, you see, after she rejects him, and he recovers quickly and marries Celia, and Sir James and Dorothea remains close friend, even though Dorothea's life, choices, which has, uh, you see that the particular decision that she, her decision to marry, Casaubon and later Ladislaw. So even though that. Uh, Although she has rejected, but he still maintains that relationship, not um, as a as a lover or something like that, but a general relationship that he maintains with her. And then we have Reverend uh, Edward Casaubon. So this is the person who got married, who's a 45 years old, bachelor, and is very wealthy and very high-ranking person, but very socially awkward and all. So, but he describes, described as a very ugly and a dry when, Sir Chetam hears that Dorothea is engaged to him, and he laments that, Cassiobon is no better than, a mummy kind of a thing. So his house, Lowick Manor, is described as correspondingly dark and dreary. And Reverend has spent several decades of his life on work of the theological scholarship called the Key to All Mythologies. So he praises patience and diligent work as the key to success. But over the course of the novel, it becomes clear that he is paralyzed by insecurity and that the project will likely never be finished. So Reverend cousin Will Ladislaw also reveals that because Reverend doesn't read German, he has not been able to keep abreast of the latest developments in theological scholarships, and uh, that is why and that which is his project, which will not be taken seriously. So Reverend suffers from ill health and dies only after a few years after getting married to Dorothea. And towards the end of his life, he becomes intensely suspicious of Will's feeling about Dorothea. And you see, this stipulates in his will that if Dorothea marries Will, and she will lose all the property she inherited from him. So he had a suspect in a very initial days. Then we have Mrs. Eleanor Cadwalder. Cadwalder. So this person is a friend of Brooks' family, and you see, she is born in a very sorry. Born into a noble family, but married down, and her husband, with Mr. Cad Wallader, is neither high, you know, very wealthy or of a high rank person, and she is nosy, gossip, prone woman who involves herself in the arrangements of marriages in Middlemarch, and she's also very charming and delivers some of the most memorable cutting lines in the novels. Please hold on. Yeah. And then we come to the next character, that is Will Ladislaw. Will Ladislaw is Reverend's young cousin and a very you find a sort of a romantic and a earnest idealist. He is, descended from two generations of rebellious women. His parental, grandmother Julia married to a very, poor Polish a musician, causing her wealthy family to abandon her, while his mother Sarah, ran away from her family after she found out their pawnbroking business was based on theft, and instead which pursued a career as an actress. So will inherited this rebellious spirit, however, but you see, despite of his passionate nature and engagement with politics, he can be restless and struggles to commit himself to pursuit that uh, not to come easily. So although you see he is reluctant to admit it, Ladislaw comes to live in Middlemarch in order to be near Dorothea, who at the time is still married to Reverend, and Mr. Brooke hires him to edit the Pioneer. uh, um, Will is hired, and Will, devotes himself to, pushing the issue of the electoral reforms. And after Reverend dies and Will and Dorothea marries, they move to London, and Will, pursues a successful political career as a public figure. And then we see the next character, that is Mr. Nicholas Bulstrode. So you see, Bulstrode is a very wealthy, banker who is not born in the Middlemarch, but rather moved, there as an adult. So little is known about the family background, which makes him an object of suspicion, and the suspicion is, heightened by the fact that he is, evangelical Methodist, which is a very unusual and a distrusted form of faith in Middlemarch. So Bulstrode, you see, occupies a number of prominent roles in Middlemarch, including, being the founder and fiancer of the new hospital, and which, you find that, so he gives all the finance for this, new hospital, and he hires, Lydgate to, direct. So Bulstrode, passionately believes in bringing medical reforms to the area, and is, somewhere you find is frustrated by the opposition he encounters. So you find towards the end of the novel, you find John Raffles shows up in the Middlemarch with a very secret, about Bulstrode's past as a young man. Bulstrode, was taken in by the Dunkirk family, who made their money from, pawning stolen goods, and he married the elderly widow, Mrs. Dunkirk, and deliberately concealed the location of her daughter Sarah, so that he would inherit her wealth. So Raffles admit to blackmail, Bulstrode, which fails when Raffles dies of alcohol poisoning. And Bulstrode, accelerated Raffles' death by neglecting to tell the servant how much opium to give him, and by giving in to his pleas for alcohol. But you see, it never became totally clear how guilty Bulstrode is in actually, causing Raffles' death. So, despite Raffles's death, Bulstrode's, scandal Bulstrode, contemplates committing suicide, but eventually settles for leaving, Middlemarch. So he is able to get through this, terrible period in part, which thank to the loyal love of his wife, Mrs. Bulstrode. Then we have the next character, that is Tertius Lydgate. Uh, Tertius Lydgate is again an ambitious young doctor, very idealistic person who marries, um, whom you find in Middlemarch, hoping to positively reform the state of medicine in the area. And he was trained in London, in Edinburgh, and in Paris, and he was very passionate about the latest advances which were made in medical research, and hoped to open a medical school which will be attached to the new hospital of which he is the director, because he is appointed there as to direct. So Lydgate, faces bitter opposition to his plans for reform, particularly from the other doctors in Middlemarch, and things get worse when he marries, Rosamund Vincy, whom he loves, and but who pressurizes him into spending money he doesn't have in order to impress others. So tormented by the debt, Lydgate accepts a loan from Bulstrode and gets implicated in the scandal surrounding him, and following this, Lydgate is forced to abandon the directorship of the new hospital, and then what he does is he moves to London. So despite some success there, he considers himself a failure because he never realized his excessive ambitions, and he dies of diphtheria at the age of 50. Then we have Mrs. Lucy Vincy. Lucy Vincy is Mrs. Vincy is quite a wealthy woman who spoils her children, claiming that her eldest two children, Fred and Rosamund, are the best young man and women in Middlemarch. Fred is the child, son, and the Rosamund is the daughter. And her sister was married to Mr. Featherstone. And this link between her family and the Featherstones leads them to be mistakenly believe that Fred will inherit Featherstone's land upon his death. Then we have Rosamund Vincy. Rosamund Vincy is her daughter, Mrs. Vincy's daughter, eldest daughter, Mr. and Mrs. Vincy. And she is, renowned for her extraordinary beauty, and she's quite practical. Even, practically every man in the Middlemarch, you see, they're attracted and they're in love with her because of her beauty. And she's also talented. She was also a talented musician. So Rosamund is, very shallow and a very manipulative kind of a girl, and she marries Lydgate in the hope that she will move, up in rank through, doing so because he was working as a director, and she is, bitterly, angry with her illusions which are broken, and she realizes Lydgate is poor. And then Rosamund is, deceptive. You find she's also rude, very uncooperative with Lydgate, and repeatedly going behind his back and refusing to make financial sacrifices. She knows that she can, easily manipulate him, and does so often, which you find. But throughout most of the novel, Rosamund is adamant that she has done nothing wrong, while everyone else is to blame for the great disappointments in her life. So you find an emotional conversation with Dorothea, which appears to make Rosamund see the error of her ways. But you see this change of spirit which doesn't last long, and throughout her marriage to Lydgate, she continues to feel, resentful of him. And after Lydgate, dies, she marries a much, wealthier doctor, and which she claims in her, she claims that because that marriage that she has done, that's the reward for her. Am I clear to all of you? Are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then
Yes, sir.
we have the Mrs. Vincey's son. Mrs. Vincey's son is Fred, and Fred is the eldest son of Vincey family. And when the novel begins, he is very, very lazy kind of a very irresponsible kind of a boy, and he has failed his university exam and has thus, returned home, and he expects to inherit the land from Mr. Featherstone. Who's Mr. Featherstone? How is Fred related to Mr. Featherstone?
Featherstone is his uncle.
Yes. Fred's uncle is Mr. Featherstone. Okay. So, which, you find that he is expecting to inherit the land from Mr. Featherstone, which causes him to, be overconfident and reckless with money, and he gets into debt, though through gambling, and causes the Garth family significant financial trouble after Caleb Garth, co-signs his debts. But Fred, feels guilty about how his action affect the Garths, and but you find he remains self-centered and very ultimately caring most about his own feelings. And after Featherstone's land goes to Featherstone's illegitimate son, that is Joshua Rigg, and so you find Mr. Vincey forces Fred to go back to the university and finish his theology degree. And then you find Fred, does so, but then refuses to enter the church, and mostly, because his childhood sweetheart, Mary Garth, says that she will never, marry him if he becomes a clergyman. But Fred eventually, becomes an apprentice to Caleb, becoming more mature and responsible in this process. And he and Mary get married, having 3 children, and Fred becomes a prosperous, prosperous farmer. So who is Mary Garth? Mary Garth is the eldest daughter of Caleb and Mrs. Garth. So she is, plain looking but intelligent, pragmatic, honest, and very honorable, and she carries, a very good, image. And but she, cares for Featherstone while he is, dying, and although she is continually frustrated by Fred's, bad behavior, particularly after he loses her family's shavings, and so she remains, devoted to him, and then eventually gets married and have, 3 children. And And Mary, publishes a successful children's book, but gives the author's, credit to Fred. And then we have Mr. Peter Featherstone. Mr. Featherstone is quite a rich and widely disliked man in Middlemarch. As he dies, you see his family members clamor around him, not because they love him, but because they hope to inherit some of his fortune. So Featherstone writes two wills, and you find the second, which is overrules the first, which gives all his lands to his illegitimate son, that is Joshua Rick. Then we have Caleb Garth. Caleb Garth is Mr. Caleb Garth is a very kind and honest and hardworking, very generous kind of a man, and he is very passionate about business. The word particularly he uses to describe, working in construction and the development of land. So, but you see, he has a problem with charging too little for his work, and even working for free, and as a result you find his family is very poor. So Caleb is one of the most morally upstanding characters in the novel, and he helps many people, particularly Fred, even though he is you find although he's not satisfied by the Fred's behavior, but his kindness to Fred, arguably emerges from his extremely close relationship with his daughter Mary, who has loved Fred since childhood, and you find Mr. Brooke eventually makes him the manager of both Freshett and Tipton, which greatly improves his family's financial circumstances. Then we have Mr. Camden Fairbrothers. Mr. Camden Fairbrothers, is a local a vicar and a bachelor. So yeah, what is a vicar? Anyone who can say? Vicar is it's related to church. It's a clergyman, member of the clergy. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
So he is a very kind, always trying to help those, around him, and he's not very, strict or spiritual clergyman. But you see, nonetheless, you see, he embodies, the Christian values of love, generosity, and acceptance, and he develops a romantic interest in Mary Garth, but steps aside when he realizes Fred and Mary wants to be together. But after, Revan's death, he takes over his post as a clergyman at Lowick. Then we have some of the other characters that is Laurie. Laurie is an actress. Lydgate fell in love while he lived in Paris, and during a theater performance, she stabbed her husband, who was also a fellow actor with her, to death on stage. And there has been a confusion over whether it was very intentional or it was unintentional. Though Lydgate, maintains it was as it was an accident. What Lydgate says. So she flees to Avignon, and Lydgate follows her there, and only to have her to tell him that she stabbed her husband on purpose, and that she, doesn't like, husband. So this episode gives, Lydgate a lifelong fear of women. Okay, just a minute. Just. Yeah, sorry. Yes. So then you find this episode which gives Lydgate a, lifelong fear. Just a minute. Yeah, and then we have Joshua Rigg. Joshua Rigg is, who becomes later, Joshua Rigg Feathersome after inheriting, Feathersome's, properties, land after, and he is the illegitimate son of Mr. Featherstone. And you see, his inheritance of Featherstone entire fortunes, shocks everyone in the Middlemarch except Rigg himself, and he sells, Feathersome's house, the Stone Court, and to Bulstrode, and leaves town to fulfill his lifelong dream of opening his own, money-changing shop on a busy square. Then we have John Raffles. John Raffles is Joshua Rigg's stepfather, and he's a very alcoholic person who beats Joshua. And Raffles also worked for Bulstrode in the past, and Bulstrode hired him to find Mrs. Dunkirk's daughter Sarah, and then bribed him to pretend that Sarah couldn't be found, and then you find Raffles, returns to Middlemarch, threatening to reveal Bulstrode's secret. So Bulstrode, tries to pay him off, but this, does not work, and Raffles, contracts alcohol poisoning and dies in Bulstrode's house. So Bulstrode hastens his death through improperly, overseeing his medical care. And then we have Mrs. Dunkirk. Dunkirk is wife of Mr. Dunkirk. Following, her husband's death, she married Bulstrode, and before her own death, Mrs. Dunkirk attempted to find her, estranged, daughter, that Sarah, so that Sarah could inherit her fortune. But however, you see, after Bulstrode pretended that Sarah could not be found, Bulstrode inherited the fortune, and Sarah did not. So these are the characters of Middlemarch.
So there are also some minor characters in the novel.
Sorry.
There are also some minor characters in the novel.
Just a minute, just a minute. Yeah, yes, Siddharth, you were telling something?
Yes, sir. I'm telling that there are some minor characters in the novel also,
Okay, tell me what are they?
like Mr. Tucker, Lady Catherine, and Mr. Vinci.
Yes. Those are there. If I go on discussing everything, then I will not be able to discuss
Yes,
the
sir. I understand. Yeah, yeah.
uh, themes and all. So, what do you want?
Okay, sir.
You want me to discuss the themes, or you
No,
want
no,
me
no,
to
sir.
talk about the plot?
No, no, sir. The plot and the thematic analysis.
Okay. Actually, we are having just 1 hour, and completing in 1 hour so many things is very difficult. Means in if I say in details. Okay. So you find the plot is designed in such a way that where it is held, where is the setting done? Who can tell me?
So in the middle march,
Yeah, but particularly which place? I told you initially.
New York, sir.
In the a fictional town in Midlands. Middlemarch is in a fictional town in Midland, England. Am I
Sir,
clear?
there are too many fictional things are there. Even the writer's name is fictional. George Eliot. Mary Ann Evans is the
Hmm.
real author. The
Yes,
girl's name has been used as a pseudonym as George Eliot. So
yes.
fictional town, fictional writer.
Yeah, correct. So that is, that we can also, that is why we can, uh, when we when we are talking about, uh, um, we can refer this as a realism genre. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
course.
So which talks about the reality, but it has been masked. Don't you feel that?
Sorry, sir. Can you repeat again?
I said it has it is, we can say that this can be said as a genre, a realism genre.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if we talk about the middle march, it is Dorothea is the highly intelligent and a very religious young woman for a very good family, and her sister Celia, and she and her sister Celia are orphans and live under the care of their unmarried uncle Mr. Brooke in Tipton Grange, and you find Sir James is quoting, Dorothea, and comes to dinner at Tipton along with Reverend, who is a 45 years old bachelor and is a theological scholar. So, uh, you know, you can see the theology has been also reflected so many theology has been given importance here because he was a reverend, and also theology was read by somebody else. Who was it? Who was it? Were you actually listening to me when I was, telling you the characters? It was Fred. You remember who's Fred?
Yes, sir.
Who's Fred?
Fred was the son of Featherstone. Featherstone.
No. You are wrong. Who can tell me?
Rosamund's brother.
Yes.
Featherstone was his uncle.
Featherstone was his uncle, and he wanted to inherit, Featherstone's, land.
Yes, sir.
Please don't confuse yourself.
Okay,
So you
sir.
find you find that Reverend has spent multiple decades working on the ambitious work of the religious history, the key of all mythologies, and Dorothea has passionately at work on the architectural designs for cottage for the tenant farm workers in Tipton. And at dinner, she takes a liking to Reverend, whom she believes resembles, John Locke and must be a very great man. And she fantasizes that he will, propose to her and imagines a life wherein she can, fulfill her intellectual ambitions, through help, though, helping, probably she thought that she will be helping him to finish the key to all mythologies. So Sir James is very enthusiastic about seeing Dorothea's plan for the cottage come, to Fruition, and where Reverend seems very uninterested in him. And you see, Mr. Brooke tells Dorothea that the Reverend is interested in marrying, but soon after, Reverend, sends Dorothea a rather stiff, awkward letter in which he proposes to her. Dorothea is so happy, and she's burst into tears, and and the tears, drops to the floor. So Mr. Brooke and their family friend, Mrs. Cadwallader, and both, they're hesitant about the idea of Dorothea accepting the Reverend, but they eventually, you know, relent and saying, that Dorothea can do what she wants. And Sir James is also, shocked and horrified at Dorothea's decision, but more out of concern for her than pity for himself. And he and Dorothea remains, friend, and he continues to make regular visits to Tipton. So while on a very marital visit to a reverend's house, Lowick Manor, Dorothea, Celia, Mr. Brooke, Reverend, all, they run into Reverend's second cousin, and who's Will Ladislaw, who is, carrying a sketchbook. And later, a dinner party is held at Tipton in advance of the wedding, and the attendees were, Lydgate, who was an ambitious young doctor, and who has, just moved to Middlemarch and hopes to bring, cutting-edge medical reforms in the area. And Lydgate, has become, entranced by Rosamund Vincy, who is known as most beautiful woman in the Middlemarch. And where you see Rosamund's brother Fred is a lazy, irresponsible, and a very arrogant young man. So Fred is expecting to inherit his uncle's, land, Mr. Feathersums, an ailing, widely disliked person in but a very wealthy man. But then Fred has been, using this anticipated fact to borrow money, and Fred is in love with Mary Garth, whom he has, known since they were children. And Rosamond, you find, meanwhile, is determined to marry Lydgate, believing that she can rise in, wealth and status by doing so. And then you have Bulstrode is, we see that he's a wealthy banker who's, treated with suspicion because he is a newcomer of obscure origin, and also, because he is, you find he is financing the new hospital where Lydgate is serving, is appointed and serving as the director. So, although Fred originally, borrowed money for gambling from the local horse dealer, that is Mr. Bambridge, is another character. After he couldn't pay it, Caleb Garth, co-signs for him for his, this um, uh, money that he has taken. So when Lydgate was serving in Paris, he felt, love with this actress Laura, and who has killed his husband. And this incident was, left Lydgate determined that this has to maintain a very scientific attitude towards women from then on. And he is very, charmed by Rosamond, but doesn't want to marry for another 5 years, as he, first needs time to focus on his career. So Lydgate, develops a friendship with a Vicar named Farbrother, and Lydgate, feels reluctant about voting for Mr. Tyke for the, at the new hospital, where you find Lydgate eventually, gives it into the pressure from Bulstrode, and gives the deciding vote to Tyke. So then we have, while at Vatican, Will Ladslaw and his friend Naumann, a German who's a German painter, catch sight of Dorothea, and Dorothea is, not enjoying her honeymoon, and she feels, disappointed by, Reverend's behavior towards her, and particularly his refusal to her to help him with the, work that he is working. So Will, comes to see her at her, place, and while, Reverend is working at the Vatican Library, where Reverend finds out that he wants to ban Dorothea from seeing Will alone, but he doesn't, go through with it. And the next day, Naumann asks, Dorothea and Reverend to sit for him, and they agree, and Will, visits Dorothea alone again, and reveals that the key to all mythologies, the work that Reverend is working on, is doomed to failure because Reverend can't read German, and thus, doesn't know the latest advancements or developments in the theological scholarship. So Fred, remains troubled, and then you find, he is develops a kind of, because of his depth, he's in debt, and also at the same time he has failed in the university exam. So and then you find that they, Fred, develops a fever, and the Vincey's doctor, Mr. Wrench, tends him to tends him, but Fred's condition also only deteriorates. And Rosamond, sees Lydgate walking past and calls him in. And then you find, Mrs. Bulstrode, hears the rumor that Lydgate and Rosamond are engaged. And after she asks Lydgate about it, he resolves to stop, coming to Vincey's house unless a professional reason. But you find, and then after you find Feathersome's death, draws near. His relatives all, crowd around him because they are more, into not into interested on into not interested in him, rather than they were interested more into his properties, and or some of them can inherit some thing. But it was only Joshua Rigg, the illegitimate son, who was who inherited all the property. And you know and then you see England is gripped by the political tumult of, as possibly of the electoral reform gains momentum, and Mr. Brooke buys the local progressive newspaper, The Pioneer, which is where Will Ladislaw is the editor-in-chief. And there you find Will, defies him to accept the position, and then meanwhile you find Brooke is accused of being a hypocrite for running for election in a progressive platform, while he is known to be an unkind landlord. And there you find Rigg's stepfather, John Raffle, arrives in Middlemarch seeking money from Rigg, and but Rigg, bitterly dismisses him due to the fact that Raffle is an alcoholic person and used to beat Rigg. And then you find Reverend, whose health continuously continues to fall, and is not able to his health is not remaining good, and Dorothea to make a promise to him that she will fulfill a request of his after he dies, thinking that he intends to ask her to finish the key to all mythologies. But Dorothy hesitates to say, Dorothy hesitates and says that she will give him an answer in the morning. And she decides to say yes, but when she goes, to tell Reverend her answer, she finds him dead. So Mr. Brooke and Sir James learns that a stipulation in Reverend will states that if Dorothea marries Ladislaw, she will lose all her property. And Celia reveals this to Dorothea, who's shocked, but for the first time she consciously considers the possibility that she has feeling for Will. And then you find, Reverend's death, and Dorothea has been living in, in Freshett and with Cecilia and her new baby, and but you see she is growing bored and will visit her and tell her that he is leaving Middlemarch. And you see, after this point of time, you find Rosamond has a miscarriage after horseback riding, when Lydgate told her not to, and she and Lydgate deeply in debt, forcing Lydgate to sell their silverware, which infuriates Rosamond. And Rosamond tells Will about the stipulation in Reverend's will forbidding him from marrying Dorothy. So and then you find Raffles reappears, and he's very sick, and Bulstrode takes him in and calls Lydgate, diagnoses him, and finds him alcohol poisoning, where you see Dorothea says that she believes Lydgate is innocent and tries to get him to stay, but Lydgate refuses. And Dorothea, you see, um, goes to Lydgate and sees Will and Rosamond holding hands while Rosamond cries, and she misinterprets that the sights as the evidence that Will and Rosamond are in love. So later you find Dorothea comes to see Rosamond, and Rosamond explains the misunderstanding, adding that Will, loves Dorothea. And then you find Will and Dorothea finally admits their feeling to one another. And although Will initially remains convinced that they cannot marry due to Reverend's will, and Dorothea tells him that she will forsake her fortune to marry him, and despite the fact that the most of her close friends and family members are against the union. So Bulstrode leaves Middlemarch, agreeing to give the house to Fred. And then you find the narrator explains what happens, to each of the main characters at the end of the main narrative. Fred and Mary, they get married and have a happy, prosperous life together. Rosamond Lydgate marriage remains unhappy, and when Lydgate dies at 50, he considers himself as a failure. And Dorothea and Will live in London, where Will has a successful political career, and Dorothea is a wife of a mother, and even a mother. So this is the plot of Middlemarch. I think themes. I don't think time. We will not be able to discuss because we have already closed time, because I have another class also. So, did you understand?
Sir, understood.
Yes, sir.
Is it actually helping, or?
Sir, it is helpful, but in one class we are not able to understand all the things. Particularly, I am telling about myself. Particularly in one class, I am not able to understand all the characters at once.
Yeah, but
Sir, I have a suggestion for all the people who wants to study this. If they can watch some animated things like in
Yes,
YouTube.
sir.
Whenever they're going back to study, you all can see some animated videos in YouTube. There you can understand the character at least for the next version, which sir told. So we can carry forward with that. Since it's a big novel, as I told before
yeah,
also, sir has taught it in a very easy manner, like the characters and all these things. But it is something that we need to do it on our own as well.
yeah.
Once we go on with the questions and the character sketch and all those things, we can understand. We can take stepwise. First, we can go on with the characters, then we can go on with the themes and setting and all these things. Then it becomes a little bit easier, which I feel.
Yes, correct. I also agree
Okay,
with
okay.
that.
Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah, but the thing is, these animated videos, you really can't rely on them, because some of them are very, very manipulative. Means some of the characters are actually not there in the original text, but I don't know, they have given in some, because some of the students last year, not last, the year before, they had sent me some of these animated YouTube videos. I had heard, but I'm also trying to, I will try to make some videos and I'll start a YouTube channel, which will be helpful. I'm just thinking, but I don't know, its time is not permitting. Otherwise, I would have done. But anyways, Pramod sir is recording, and Salman, you are also recording. So I think if it might be helpful somewhere when you hear afterwards.
Yes, sir. Of course, it's helpful. And for the thing is that we just need to give time. Even we have movie series for all these
Yes,
uh,
yes, correct.
novels. So
Mhm.
if we can watch the movie also, na, keeping on the fact that animation videos or any videos is just for like basic understanding.
Correct,
Once
correct.
we get the rough sketch of it, if we look these works like a drawing or a painting, we're just doing the rough sketch while we are watching the videos. Once we go on to the deep analysis and all these things, we can analyze it more further.
Correct, correct. Right.
Brother Solomon, if you
Um,
have any video, kindly share that one.
Yes, I will share some of the videos if it's possible. Surely I will share.
yeah,
And sir,
if you
sir,
can please share it in the group, then they
yes,
can.
sir, sure shot. I will share. Um, since before this also we had one Megmentors group which is connected all over India. So not only RC Bhubaneswar, all the RCs are connected in one group. So with that, we have throughout all the material that has been provided to be in one slot. So that
Okay.
is how the seniors have worked on, many RCs have worked on, and then this thing has happened. So there are many videos and stuff. If there is a requirement of the videos also, I will send it in the group itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That might be helpful for some of them, you know,
Yes, sir. Sure,
because
sure.
yeah, because I believe that in IGNOU, those who are doing MA in English, most of them, I mean, many of them do not have a, they come from some different background. I mean, the different background in the sense means from different subject backgrounds. So catching up to English means all these things with relating it to history that uh, becomes a little difficult for every. I mean, some of them in the initial stage. But I'm sure the materials. If you go through the materials of IGNOU, you can really understand many things.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Uh, so.
Thank you,
Uh,
sir.
yeah. Would you? Can we end the class today?